everyone, this is Tiffany, and I wanted to take a moment to say thank you for hanging in there with Jeanette and I as we both got super busy with life and working over the summer and into fall. We're happy to be back and ready to bring you more great content in the near future. Also, this marks our official second season with our Mahogany and Willow podcast, so here's to season 2. Enjoy, and thank you guys again for joining us. Welcome to another episode of Mahogany and Willow. Hi, Jeanette.
Hello, Tiffany. How are you?
I'm good. It's so good to be back. We are going to have a fascinating conversation today about love languages and what that means to you, for you. When I was doing a little bit of research on love languages, of course, there's only 5 that you're going to find that are listed from years and years ago. And I myself read a book called The 5 Love Languages by Pastor Gary Chapman. And those love languages that he was talking about were words of affirmation, quality time, physical touch, acts of service, and gifts. So I'm going to come right to you right out of the gate.
Of course you are.
Yes. And I want, as you were thinking about this and kind of rolling through this conversation that we were going to have, what came to your mind? Like if you're, whether you want to speak about your personal love languages, is there more than 5? Is this not enough? Tell me what you think.
I'm instantly going to say, well, this is an interesting topic. You know me. Yeah, it's funny because years and years ago, when I was first introduced to love languages and I read the book, I could really see the definite lines between one love language and another. And I could feel my own experience. And I thought at the time it was quality time. That is the love language that I gave most. But as the years have progressed and as there's been more and more life experience, I suppose, to kind of put those things up against, I find it really fascinating that what happens is we have a primary love language, yes, but there's all these nuances to it because we have a primary love language that's based on what we experienced as love when we were kids and how we defined it as love. We also have an influence from what our individual parents, mother and father, both their love languages are. We also have generally a different love language that we receive as love and a love language that we give as love. So over the years, it has become far less simple and based around, oh, that's me. There's a lot of layers to that's what I've found over the years.
Yeah, it is interesting. And once you start to dive into it a little bit more as well, you start to realize too that I have more than one. I do have my top that I think, oh, that's my love language. That's where I get my most fulfillment and feeling loved by my partner, by that one thing. But again, like you said, there's a lot more nuance to it as you dive a little deeper. And you find in a lot of ways that what you give is what you want back. And that's your love language is everything that you're giving. And I find for me that one of my biggest things that I do all the time is constantly like acts of service. Like I'm annoyingly that way where, John will be doing something like, do you need any help? Can I help you with that? Well, what can I do for you? And then I'm going around the horn trying to figure out what I can do without him asking me to do it because I see it needs done. I'm very much in tune with that. And I guess I chalk that up to acts of service. What can I do to help? Can I help? Can I help? Jump up at my kids' houses, take care of things that I obviously see needs done. Now, does anybody do that for me? No.
Exactly.
No. But boy, would I love that where something is obviously piling up. Dust is an inch thick around here. The floor is covered in mud. Boy, would it be nice if somebody just jumped up and just did it. Don't have to be asked. That to me would be my ultimate love language. But it is what it is.
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah. And at first glance, you might think that all of these love languages pertain to you, but really what really makes you tick when it comes to relationships and what you require to make you feel you're truly being fulfilled or your love bank is full is it's very personal. And it's when I was doing some research too, I was kind of diving into what other people thought about the love languages. And a lot of so-called experts were saying that there's way more than five, and you can't just generalize them into these groups. When you think about you, what is that you would consider your primary love language?
My adult life has always been filled with, I will offer my time. Like, I will offer my time. I may not have every other resource on the planet. I always had an abundance of time, and I always had an abundance of effort. So I was always willing to spend the time wherever anybody needed the time. I had that, and that was what I was willing to share. So it's interesting because again, it goes back to what you give and what you receive. But I've had people in my life offer me time, and I don't feel I perceived that as them showing me love when they did it. So there's the other aspect of, my mom was probably a little bit more gift oriented. My dad was probably a little more active service oriented. So there's those two things. And I know that I've attracted relationships where I would receive what their love language would be. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Like, I would attract someone who was constantly offering me gifts, and that kind of weirded me out. I couldn't quite wrap my brain around that. It felt really almost invasive in a way, but I didn't realize that it was because it was connecting to whatever issues I might have with my mom. And then I would have someone who was constantly doing acts of service, and I didn't read that as love really either. So I don't know. And there's a lot of overlap in there with our attachment styles. If you have an anxious attachment style, you're more likely to misidentify what someone's loving gestures are anyway, because you're looking for red flags, you're looking for inconsistency, you're looking for, you know what I mean? There's just so many parts to it anymore that I wish it was as simple as that book that I read at first, where there was 5, and it was, it's this, would you give me this, please? And if you give me this, I'll feel loved. And if you give me that, or if I give you that, you'll feel loved. Just because it's our love language doesn't mean we're really going to receive it as loving when someone else offers it.
Right. And while you were talking, I was thinking about attachment style, of course, and then also how some people who aren't exactly the most healthy of partners love bomb when they want something. And if you misconstrue that love bombing in a time of turmoil in a relationship, then you're thinking, oh, that person loves me so much because they're love bombing me. My love language is, words of affirmation, overdoing it, gifts, whatever, because that's their way of love bombing. And that's a way to kind of hook you back in a situation that may not be healthy, because it's kind of like, okay, if you're going to love bomb me, please be consistent. That way, you know, it's sincere. And then it feeds that need for those different so-called love languages. You're fulfilling those for me. So then I do feel consistently loved, consistently respected, consistently whatever. But if it is really inconsistent, then that person that is craving those things from your partner that's not so healthy, they come back at you, love bombing you after they hurt you. You feel like, oh, they do love me. Well, yeah, if it's consistent, I can understand why you would feel loved and you'd be fulfilled. But if it's inconsistent and then they just completely love bomb you just to get you back or hook you back, then it's unhealthy as hell. But again, that rolls into our multiple times we're going to mention attachment styles, 100%, and why that feeds you at that moment to keep you in a situation that may not be the best situation for you. Words of affirmation along with acts of service, in my case, seems to be something that I really get my fulfillment out of, get my, like, okay, that person does care. Because again, that's what I do. I'm like, oh, you look so nice today. Oh, you look handsome today. Oh my gosh, you look so good. Oh, blah, blah, blah. And I just do. And it's funny if you're that person that kind of is consistent in your complimenting your partner, giving to your partner, whatever it is that you are as a person. That word consistency comes back again, even when you're not feeling those things back, even when you're not getting those back, you still do it. It's just who you are. I was exposed to the 5 love languages by Pastor Gary Chapman back when I was married to my girls' dad. And that was a long time ago.
Yeah.
I was looking for something, obviously. It's no secret we're not together anymore. And it kind of opened up my mind to a lot of things of my first, I guess, real experience in going down that rabbit hole of trying to better myself 25, whatever years ago. And I haven't read it since, I haven't, but it impacted me so much back then that I have utilized just knowing this information over the years. What prompted you to read this? And then at the time, did it benefit you? What is it that did for you back then, Jeanette?
It was a lot of the same circumstance. I was in a relationship that wasn't positive for me. I was, still struggling with all my own patterns, and he was doing the same. And it just wasn't a very healthy relationship. So I think from that space, you go looking for a solution. And the one great thing about that book is it kind of made it feel like there was a fixed solution. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like if I recognize this, if I understand this, then it's all better. That's not really a way that things solve, especially deep, embedded, ingrained, downloaded, parts of the self. And so it's not a fixed thing. Like if I am regulated and I'm with my partner and he spent quality time with me, I would read that as loving and caring and all of that. Versus if I'm dysregulated and I'm maybe in my wounded child space and I'm having a connection to a moment in time when I was feeling abandoned or rejected or anything like that, and my partner spent quality time with me, I might actually find it a little more dysregulating. So it's interesting because I guess at the time that I read it, I hoped it would be a fixed solution. I hoped it would gain us some ground in resolving some of our relational difficulties. And it did in moments, but we still didn't understand all the nuances of dysregulation and what happens and why it happens. I really wanted it to be a fixed solution and just didn't realize at the time that there was a lot more going on than just, I didn't recognize my love language. I didn't recognize his love language. There were just so many more layers to it. So over, all these years later, of course, it's interesting because once the attachment style conversation began, I think a lot of people started to feel a little more capable of grounding within themselves, like, okay, that makes sense. Now we're talking about nervous systems. We're talking about regulation and dysregulation. I think now we've actually got language that people can really wrap their minds around. And the love language is still valid. I mean, that whole concept is very valid. It's just, you have to recognize that at times it's going to be accessible. At times it's not. Right. And at times it's going to feel better. And at times it's not. And it could shift, like in one circumstance, if I'm dysregulated in a certain way, I might want you to come give me a hug. If I'm dysregulated in another way, I might kind of need you to just leave me be for a minute, Right. So there's all these other layers to it that just make it one tool that we can kind of have in our toolkit, as long as we don't believe it's the tool. Right. And we don't believe that it's kind of the end all be all. if we get this, we've got it made.
Absolutely. No,
Yeah.
100%. And that makes total sense to me, because it is definitely a basket full of stuff that we all bring to a relationship. And you cannot just think that it's, well, if you just bought me more gifts, I'd feel better. Well, if you did the dishes all the time, we'd be so much better off. And it's like, it is a plethora of other things. I want to keep learning and growing and find out, okay, what is it that I could do better? What is it could I communicate better? Could I regulate better? All those things for my own health and well-being, which of course affects my relationship.
Well, and wouldn't it be nice? It's interesting. My son was telling me this the other day, and I thought it was so fascinating, because we were talking about being regulated and dysregulated. And it's interesting because we, especially in relationship, this applies. We think that we will feel or should feel regulated, and then we will do something. And so from that perspective, we're always kind of waiting to feel regulated for a chunk of time. Like when I feel regulated for a month straight with you, I'll know that this is the right relationship. And oh my gosh, I'm like dysregulated multiple times a day. And I'm single. I don't have anybody pushing on me. You know what I mean? So, because we were talking about gardening, and I was asking him about being regulated and then gardening, and he said, I will feel regulated when I've done this, that, or whatever, whatever the task was. And I thought, oh, that was really an inspired thing for me, because I realized, wouldn't it be nice if in our relationships we could think to ourselves, instead of, I should feel regulated with you, or I should feel regulated and then I will include you, or anything like that. What if it's when we are cooperating in a healthy way, when we're doing this cooperatively, kind of forces me to lean into, okay, I can do that. Like I can work toward that very easily, knowing, believing that regulation is on the end of that. Like I'm not going to feel regulated when I'm working against my patterns, my emotional issues and patterns. I'm not going to feel regulated the entire time, possibly the entire time we're doing this thing. Maybe I won't feel regulated at all. But I know if this is the outcome, then I will feel regulated then. So from that perspective, I can reach for something different than that need to feel regulated now, or else you're not the one. Or we can do that all day long, because all day long we're regulated and dysregulated. Like both of us are bouncing back and forth between regulation and dysregulation. When we're regulated, maybe that's when the love languages come into play the strongest. Like that's when I recognize love. That's when I can give you love, even if it's in a way that's different than what I usually think about. But let's just keep leaning into that, knowing that at that point we will feel regulated and our love languages will make sense. And
what about this? As you were talking, I'm sitting here thinking to myself, okay, then there are times, especially when we're younger, everything hinges upon what your boyfriend or whatever does or says. So if he does that, and only if he does that, will I feel regulated, which is not healthy in itself, because you are personally in your own self dysregulated, and what they do, it's kind of like everything hinges upon if he's good to me, nice to me, if he doesn't break up with me, if he blah, blah, blah. Only then will I feel good. Only then will my world come together. Only then will I feel regulated. When it's like, okay, there's two different sides to that. There's the personal, on your own, feeling regulated or dysregulated. And then there's your relationship feeling regulated or dysregulated. So it's like if you are a hot mess of your own, and then your relationship is a hot mess, and you're waiting on him or her to make that one move or those words or that whatever it is to make your world complete, there's a big issue there. That's a huge problem. So, but it's hard for people to differentiate between, is it me, my own self, that's a hot mess, and I'm just putting all my like everything hinges upon what he does right now. My world will blow up if he doesn't come back to me right now. Where it's like, wait, you've got to get yourself situated, regulated, healthy, confident on your own. Just like that old saying, you can't have a healthy relationship if you can't be healthy on your own. You can't be happy in a relationship unless you're content and happy by yourself. Well, there's a lot to that. And that kind of goes hand in hand with saying you can't expect somebody, your partner, to save your hot mess person on their own. You've got to do the work to get to the point to where you ask for what you need, don't settle for what you don't want, whatever it is. Is that making sense? Am I making sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
But I'm going to make a really bold statement, because I'll tell you this flat out, and I can argue this. I don't argue with people generally, but I would argue this all day long. People will ask me how to tell if they're dysregulated or their partner's dysregulated. Yeah. And here's that bold statement. If you're feeling anything other than regulated, it's you.
There you go. Totally.
You're dysregulated.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it makes no difference what that person in front of you is doing. You are dysregulated. So you are the one, because when people say you have to be okay on your own before you get in a relationship, people like to twist that into, so you're telling me I have to be single my whole life? It's like, no. Right. You can be staring at another human being, but if you're feeling dysregulated, it is you that's dysregulated. It is inside of you where the work needs to be done. It is all about you. And the reason that I can say that and absolutely 100% agree with that, all day long, is because I was one of those classic people that I would feel dysregulated. And because of the anxious part of me, I would feel dysregulated, and I could have swore it was them.
Right.
I mean,
right.
I would have swore it was them every time it was them.
Yeah.
And now I understand. No, sweetheart, if I feel anything, if anything's in my stomach, if I'm feeling anything going on in my system, in my body, in my emotions, I am the one dysregulated, and it has to do with me. It has to do with my patterns. It has to do with my downloading. It's not my fault. And that's the other thing. It's not a fault thing,
right?
But it is absolutely a me thing. And same with the partner. We don't have to exclude either one of those. But at the same time, that's where, if in a relationship we were saying, for the two of us to be connected and regulated, that would be like the ideal. So let's just move toward that. And then we can kind of, like I said, drop the need to worry about love languages, drop the need to worry about past conditioning. It's like, let's just do whatever it takes in this moment, because that's the other thing. Every moment is going to give you a new opportunity to uncover another layer of each one of your psyches. And so it won't be the same thing twice. It's not going to be, this is the path and we're going to be on it and we're just going to stay there forever. That's not what life does in general. And the second you think you have that in your life, I guarantee you from experience that life will hand you something that you do not have a handle on at all.
Oh, absolutely. Oh my gosh. Yeah. Yeah. And if you have blinders on thinking anything otherwise, you're like, oh, I feel bad for you, because shit happens, man. And you're challenged, like you said, every single day. Whether you're single or with somebody, you can get out of whack, dysregulated. Something sets you off. Something goes haywire. Stress pops in. Whatever it is, that kicks you in the butt and makes you go back and go, oh, I feel out of whack. And relying on somebody else to fix that for you just because, well, if you did this, then my world would be better. That's when, again, you come back to go, okay, I got something going on inside me that I need to figure out, because it's not in somebody else's hands that my happiness lies.
Right.
It isn't you just doing one or two things for me that makes my world complete. It's not that simple. And it wasn't, for me personally, it wasn't until probably the last couple of years of going through so much crap that I really started to think of the deep patterns and the childhood stuff and all the attachments and all of the things that you start to uncover willingly, mind you, not so much because, I mean, it was ugly, yes, but then it kind of makes you go, what is that? Why is that? Why do I do that? What is that about? And I want to fix that, or whatever it is. And I agree with you 1,000% that there's not at any moment in my personal life would I want to place all of my end all be all happiness in somebody else's hands, that you are what makes me complete. I mean, I get why people say that, and it's cute. It's like Jerry Maguire cute, but it's not reality, I mean, look at Jerry Maguire. He was a hot mess, and yet his girlfriend completed him. I think it's adorable, and I get it why people do that. But at the end of the day, in all reality, it ain't so, because you've got to really work on what's going on inside of you to get regulated and to feel like I complete myself. My partner is an added beautiful bonus to my life. And yes, it completes that circle of life, but to complete me, I got to do that for myself. I got to figure my own shit out and get to where I'm healthy, to where I can contribute in a healthier relationship, because nothing's worse than feeling like you're out of whack, your partner's out of whack, you together are out of whack, and you're like, this sucks. This is so not nice, not pretty, not fun, not happy, not smooth, not safe. And for me, a huge thing for me is feeling safe, 100%, like to a fault. Yeah. And I recognize that now.
That's that anxious part. Yeah. That anxiety part. All that means is you've spent a ton of your life, probably in the downloading years, when you felt unsafe. And that's what I say. It's not a fault thing, because it's not like someone intentionally hurt. I mean, most of the time, you don't even have to go through what would be considered trauma necessarily to download a pattern of, oh my gosh, I feel so unsafe. By looking at someone else's needing to do something to help us, the more we put that off, the longer we just keep replaying all of those bad patterns until you're, my age, 54, looking at your life going, dang, could have done that a little different, or whatever. But that's the stuff that we don't recognize, as long as we're pointing the finger at someone else or needing them to change. I just put off the inevitable. I just, stalled it. And now I'm having to deal with it at my age. Or we can start to kind of look at regulation. That's what I appreciate about the young people now, already having this dialogue. There's a whole new dialogue around relating in general. If I go out into public and I'm dysregulated, it's nobody's fault, not even mine. It's just dysregulation inside of me, which means I'm feeling something that's obviously not comfortable, So what are you feeling that's not comfortable? When you're looking at your partner and they say something that hurts you a little bit, I can see why people dysregulate in that moment. It's not what the partner said. It's not how they said it. I can see how it can click back into, ooh, that's a wound. It makes you feel uncomfortable.
Right.
Unsafe. Nobody likes to feel uncomfortable or unsafe. Yeah.
Right. Yep.
And those are the things that are happening to us on a daily basis, where any amount of pointing at another human being and needing them to change is just going to delay your progress.
Right. It's true. But it's also a hard pill to swallow to get to that point, to go, that's it. Nobody wants to look in the mirror and say, you need to do this. You need to do that. Let's do better here. It's not your fault. you are a good person, but we're going to do better because we want to do better. We want to be better so we can have better relationships, be in healthy situations and not be fearful, not be a hot mess and not be dysregulated all the time. Because nobody wants to feel bad all the time. We don't set out in this world as adults to go, you know what? I'm going to feel bad all the time. I'm going to spew my misery and my dysregulation on everybody, and I'm going to have failed relationship after failed relationship, and then look back in my 50s or whatever and go, holy crap, what have you done? What I like to say is the common denominator is what, or the common denominator is who, when there's this type of pattern or this type of thing. And I have that myself where, okay, what have I contributed? What have I not contributed? What did I do? What did I not do? What did I say? What did I not say? Whatever it is. And be honest. That's the hard part for a lot of us, is to be brutally honest with yourself and look at yourself in the mirror and say, this is the end, but this is the beginning of this, and this. So from here forward, you can look at what it is that needs to be worked on, what you need to be honest with yourself about, and make the steps in the right direction. And if you have, the end all be all in a relationship, and you have your, I won't tolerate this, or I need that. Okay, great. Know your boundaries, know your limits, know what you need, but say those things and stick to it. And if you need to also hold yourself accountable at the same time, I won't do this to this person. I refuse to be that way to this person. I'm going to break those patterns and those habits where I'm destructive or I'm self-sabotaging myself and this relationship. I won't do that anymore. So only then I think it's fair to hold boundaries and limits and parameters with your partner, but you got to hold those to yourself as well. And like you said, it's easy to blame, but we got to look at ourselves at the same time and say, let's be honest now. Come on.
Right. Absolutely.
And listen to your partner too, because they bring things to the table. And I'm not saying everybody is brutally honest in a relationship. There's times we all embellish. There's times people say things that's like, all right, that didn't happen, or that's not true. That's not accurate. I didn't say that. If we can all get to a point to where we're being honest, more honest, and not letting emotion and passion and exaggeration and all that overtake us, it's like, okay, you're obviously, something struck a nerve, but let's get down to the honesty of this. And let's have an honest conversation as to why what I just said blew you up, or what you just said to me blew me up, because it has nothing to do with you. It has to do with the fact that I've been defensive my whole life, having to fight for what the fact that I'm not this person that these people claim me to be, or my parents were this, or my siblings that. And I've been defensive my whole life, but just one thing your partner says can set you off. And it's not so much them, what they just said. It's you're in defense mode because of your childhood, and you're dysregulated. You're anxious, and trust is not there, and safety's not there. So it's this hot big bag of crap that only if you're being honest can you really open it and deal with these things piece by piece by piece. And I'm speaking for myself. That's where I'm at. And I'm thankful. It's ugly, it's brutal, it's painful, but at the same time, you don't have to be defense mode all the time. You don't have to bite somebody's head off because of what they said that puts you back, and it's not their fault. Deal with your own crap, and then we can move forward in a healthy way.
Right. And here's the thing about, for me, I mean, a lot of people I've heard before that, or I seem to have a negative perspective on life because I tend to actually allowing ourselves and allowing other people to say, I feel disappointed in you. I feel a negative emotion. Accepting that we feel a negative emotion, it's almost like, again, goes back to the regulation conversation, in the sense that a lot of times we don't even need to get to the bottom of any of it. What we really need is to be able to say to another human being, I feel dysregulated. And like you were talking about honesty, when someone is dysregulated, they don't have access to the facts necessarily, because the facts are hidden in different parts of the brain.
Mm.
So a lot of times when you're relating from that perspective, there are no hard truths, as to what you did, what they did, or whatever. So just being able to open up the dialogue and saying, I'm not one of those who wants to put everything in a rosy package. I accept the fact that I feel disappointed. I accept the fact that I feel inadequate. I accept the fact that I feel whatever negative emotion I feel. And in so embracing that negative emotion, you do what's called regulate.
Mm.
So we also don't have to, resist those conversations with each other. And, I know that that's harder for men sometimes, because a lot of times men are less connected to maybe a language that involves emotions. So it might be easier for us. But even just giving your partner the opportunity to just say, I feel dysregulated. Like, you don't have to explain it to me. You don't have to get, nitty gritty about patterns or anything like that. Just being able to say that I feel dysregulated lets me know that you need some space, you need some, some care and compassion, without me needing to needle you about why you feel that way, or, you understanding how it all got there.
Right.
So again, that's the beauty of that, regulation, dysregulation conversation that we can have, that kind of opens up a whole new opportunity for us to communicate, which I really appreciate and value. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Communication is definitely one of my love languages. I love communication, and there's so much that happens in that moment where you put everything down that's going on outside. The internal chaos is quieted. It's just you with your partner, and having a moment of complete and utter openness, rawness, honesty. It doesn't have to be a brutally ugly kind of a negative conversation. It can be a loving, kind, and appreciative, sincere conversation as well. But it breaks down the walls, and then you can feel regulated with each other at that moment. This is what I love about you. I appreciate you. I love, whatever it is. And I love those moments. It can be challenging, 100%. But I will say it's not uncommon with a man, right? With a man to, they're not big talkers. They're not big, like, vulnerable. I'm going to pour out my feelings and tell you what I think. It's just not common. I enjoyed this. My gosh, this is a great one. We're back. Well, thank you. And I'm so glad that we're back. I look forward to then spending more time chatting. And thank you again, listeners. We appreciate you so much. And thanks again for joining us for another episode of Mahogany and Willow.
Because there's always something important to talk about.